How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Shifting Lanes. My name is Hanson, and for this video, I'm standing right beside the 2023 Kia EV6 GT. I've driven the Kia EV6 GT line before. It's a great EV. I've taken it on some road trips, charged it at an ultra-fast 350 kilowatt DC fast charger, and it's just an all-around great car. This one is even better because of two letters, G and T. Now, if you go by historical perspective, GT or Grand Touring or Grand Tourer cars are beautiful, powerful cars that you could take on a long road trip. This thing has the beautiful and powerful parts down, but this doesn't have very good range, and this is where I want to kick off this review, with the power. When it comes to the power, 0 to 60 time of 3.4 seconds. Kia claims that this is faster than the Lamborghini Huracan Evo and the Ferrari Roma. So this one has more power, 160 kilowatt front motor and 270 kilowatt rear motor. So it gives you 576 horsepower combined. Now the GT line that I've driven, that has smaller motors. It has a 74 kilowatt motor for the front axle and a 165 kilowatt motor for the rear axle, giving it a combined 320 horsepower. The downside here is that it uses the same 77.4 kilowatt hour battery. The consequence here is that the range takes a hit. It has a 206 mile electric vehicle range. The wind trim in rear wheel drive or the single motor version can go up to 310 miles, and that is the cheapest EV6 you could buy at under $49,000. This EV6 GT, as equipped with delivery, is around $63,000, which for the range doesn't really feel very good. And in Kia's defense, this is riding on the e-gmp platform, which is now shared with the Hyundai Ioniq 5, the Genesis GV60, and the new Hyundai Ioniq 6. And those cars, they're already packed to the brim with batteries. You can't physically pack in any more batteries on the floor unless battery technology evolves and becomes more energy dense. And you might be able to pack in more cells elsewhere, but that's going to hugely affect the other aspects of the car, like cargo capacity and also the driving dynamics. The good thing about the EV6 GT is that it still has the ultra fast charger. It's built on the 800 volt charging architecture. So it has a maximum DC charge rate of 235 kilowatts. Now, most DC fast chargers are 150 kilowatts, so you can't charge any faster than that. But if you could find a 350 kilowatt charger, this should be able to charge from 10 to 80% state of charge in under 18 minutes. With the more common 150 kilowatt charger, you could probably expect to go from 10 to 80% in about a half hour. Now, if you need to charge up, the charge port is on the back side, so you're gonna have to back into your charging station. Here you can see the status light. Here you have your J1772 plug and also your CCS or DC portion. And you should also keep in mind that this doesn't come with its own charging cable, as I found out on one of my road trips with the GT line EV6. So you're gonna have to buy one aftermarket. And if you do have a charging cable, you could store it in the front trunk. There's a dedicated space just enough for that cable. Another benefit of this Kia EV6 is that there is a built-in heat pump in here, so that's going to reduce some of the range degradation in the winter months. Now, EVs aren't like normal internal combustion engine cars where you can use the engine's byproduct, which is heat and friction, to get warm air inside the cabin. EVs without a heat pump, they'll have to operate a heater, and that's going to reduce your range in the cold, in addition to the lower efficiency of the batteries in the cold temperatures. So a double whammy there. The heat pump in this car is basically a refrigerator that's flipped inside out. It's much more energy efficient, and it's going to make you nice and toasty inside without draining a lot of the energy from the batteries. So from a power perspective, I'm going to give this a rating of 8 out of 10 because how often can you buy a near 600 horsepower car for under $65,000? It's a very small list, and this one is $62,865 after delivery. And what I think these Kia EV6 GTs have been designed for is to really generate some headlines, and they're designed to get people into those dealerships' doors. This Kia EV6 GT is great, but the GT line I think is even better because the range is much more reasonable, and it's also cheaper. And I think most customers will find the acceleration numbers really appealing, but they'll walk away with a much more reasonable version of the Kia EV6. And the last point I want to make with power is that this is proof that EVs are still not for everybody. EVs aren't great road tripping cars because the charging infrastructure is still not that great. Fast charging stations are still few and far between, and sometimes those charging stations aren't very well maintained, so your mileage may vary. But if you don't plan on using these EVs for road trips, and perhaps you could charge at home or at work, and your workplace isn't too far away, does range really matter if it's 200 miles or 300 miles? Especially if you could charge from 10 to 80% in 18 minutes, maybe a half hour? It's really going to depend on your use case, and if you can't reliably charge, then this is simply not the car for you. But if charging is very easy for you, then the EV6 GT is going to be awesome. Now, when it comes to the driving experience, I like to think that the 300 horsepower mark is the yardstick. That was the case for the 90s and 2000 era of cars, and I think it still applies today, even with the more stringent safety standards and all of the extra added features. EVs are heavier because there's a lot of batteries between the wheels, and so it's going to require more power. And 576 horsepower for an EV is still near supercar territory. So with more power, everything about the driving experience is improved. Now let's talk about the ride. This is going to be on the firm side, and it can be a little bit harsh because of these 21-inch wheels. These are 255 millimeter wide tires, and they're also lower profile, so you're going to have a more firm ride. Cars with thicker aspect ratios, that's just going to improve the ride because that's just more cushion for those bumps. As for the wheels are bigger too, so this is going to have a larger moment of inertia compared to the smaller wheels, and we've seen this affect the Ioniq 6. You can see that the 18-inch version of the wheels compared to the 20-inch version of the wheels will produce longer range. So with Kia going with this 21-inch wheel, it's probably to clear the brakes a little bit better, but it doesn't seem like you need all 21 inches. You could probably go down to maybe 20 or 19-inch and maybe have a more aerodynamic design to improve the range. Now, when it comes to the sound quality during your ride, it is a bit louder than other EVs. Most of it's because of those tires, but you can drown some of that outside noise out with the built-in sounds. The engineers did get cute with this. They added some stylish and cyber sounds that will produce this space age-like science fiction sound. And there's also the dynamic version, which sounds like a bad vacuum cleaner. Now, when it comes to the handling, this thing will handle like most all-wheel drive EVs. And that's just awesome because most of the weight is going to be below and between those four wheels. So this is going to have the same characteristics as an EV6 because it has the same size battery pack, but just slightly bigger motors. And I guess that's the benefit of having the same size battery. You don't change the driving dynamics of this car. And the only parasitic mass here is just the larger motors. Now, when it comes to braking, the EV6 GT has bigger brakes compared to the other trims. There's 15-inch rotors for the front and 14.2-inch rotors for the rear. So the effect of bigger brakes and also the bigger wheels is just more unsprung weight, and that is going to impact the range. But these brakes are a necessary upgrade because chances are you're going to be going faster with this EV6 GT, and these mechanical brakes is a nice addition to the iPedal feature. And I really like the iPedal feature in this EV6 GT. It provides you with that one pedal driving feature, and it really reduces a lot of your foot fatigue when you're in bumper to bumper traffic or just driving around town in general. You almost never have to touch the brake pedal. As for the steering, I think it's very par for the course for these e-gmp platform cars. It feels nice and there's good feedback and decent performance considering this is an electric power steering system. So from a driving experience perspective, I'm going to give this a rating of 9 out of 10 because this has amazing power that's going to make for a memorable driving experience, but this still has an appliance feel to it. This is an EV. There's no drama, there's no big mechanical noises, no imperfections, just pure brutal speed when you put your foot down. So it doesn't have that charm of an internal combustion engine, but that's to be expected. Now, when it comes to the exterior, I think this is a very sharp and odd looking car. As for the front end, it looks mean. The grille is completely enclosed, and there's actually front shutters up there that will open to manage the battery temperatures. And those will also open when the air conditioning system is switched on. Now the headlights, they have a very distinctive daytime running light design, and you could spot these easily on the road. As for the profile, this is where the EV6 gets interesting. It's part wagon, part shooting brake, and part hatchback. It's hard to tell what this thing looks like. Additionally, if you look at the drag coefficient of this car, this is rated at 0.297. The base EV6 has a drag coefficient of 0.280, and the wheels play a big part in that. And even though the design is very sleek, it's still not as slippery as other EVs using this platform. From the back, this EV6 has a really gorgeous taillight design. It has an integrated spoiler that acts as that connective tissue between the two taillights. This is a strong design feature, and it really defines the look of this car. Meanwhile, the top spoiler adds to that raciness feel. So from an exterior design perspective, I'm going to give this a rating of 9 out of 10 because I think it has great looks, it's distinctive. The big wheels look aggressive, but you pay for it in reduced range. When it comes to the interior, I think the EV6 looks great, and I'll go into more detail about the tech in the next section. But visually, these dual 12.3-inch screens look very attractive, and it's a similar design to the other e-gmp platform cars. Starting with the steering wheel, I love the two-spoke design. This is a very comfortable place to put your hand. All of the buttons are physical. There's no touch-sensitive stuff on the steering wheel. And this GT button is the distinctive feature on this trim, in addition to the neon yellow stitching. Paddle shifters are good, but gimmicky in these EVs because they're kind of rarely used. They're used to adjust the regen braking of the car. It's usually a one-time change and you don't use it anymore. As for the climate controls and the radio buttons, this is where it gets a bit controversial for these Kia cars. The climate and the radio buttons have been merged into this single panel, and there's this toggle button where you could switch between the two major functions. The downside here is that you can unintentionally turn something up or down, like changing up the volume when you're actually changing up the temperature. The good thing here is that you could change the behavior of this display. So you could long press on this toggle and something will come up here where you could change the default display between infotainment or climate or off. So when you change it to off, this acts as a toggle, whereas if you change it to these specific ones, it will go to that display for 5 seconds and default to the other mode. So I'm going to change to climate so that this is going to default to this display. And if I hit this, it's going to change to this and will stay there for 5 seconds, and it's going to go back to the other display. Personally, I like to keep this in the climate setting because you always have the steering wheel buttons to control the volume and also changing your modes, and also the seek function is in here. Whereas the climate controls, you only have this one or the touchscreen to change the temperature. And as for the touch sensitive features on this thing, I don't really mind it too much because these are features that you don't normally change very often. You kind of set it and forget it, but I still appreciate these physical dials on here. As for the center console, this is Kia's own take. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6, they have different designs. In here, you could find the heated seat buttons and also the heated steering wheel controls. And then you have your power button and your transmission dial, and here's your parking button. Over here is your 360-degree camera view, and if you switch that, you can toggle between the different views of your 360-degree camera feeds. And then you have your auto brake hold and the parking sensors button. Over here you have a pair of cup holders and a wireless charger, and there's this easy status bar to show if it's still charging. Performance is going to vary depending on your phone and your phone's case, so your mileage may vary here. As for the armrest, this is of a decent size. There's no USB ports inside here, but pretty large space to put tall items. As for the USB connections, all the connections are down below. There's two that's off of the center console itself, and there's also a USB-C and a 12-volt 180-watt connection down below. I'll talk more about it in the tech section, but there's no wireless Apple CarPlay or wireless Android Auto, so you're going to have to wire in. And chances are you're going to have to either put your phone down below or up here. And if you put it up here, you're going to have cables kind of draping over the center console. But thankfully, there's cable management systems on the center console, which is nice. As for the seats, these seats are pretty amazing. They're grippy, and it looks like it was borrowed from the Hyundai Elantra N. It has the same aggressive shape and the thick bolsters. This is very supportive for the kind of G's that this thing can put down on the straights and side to side. The difference here is that the GT logo doesn't seem to light up when you turn the car on, whereas on the Veloster N and the Elantra N, it has the N symbol that will light up. And these seats are manually operated. It's the same way in the Elantra N or the Veloster N, which seems kind of strange for a $60,000 car, but this seems to have been a parts bin choice for Hyundai and Kia. But wow, what a great seat, and I love how it's also heated. As for the second row, this has spacious 39 inches of rear legroom, and headroom is at 38 inches. I'm 5'8", and I have a good amount of headroom in here, but it's totally going to be tighter for you 6-footers out there. This still has the same nice Alcantara or microfiber interior in here, and these outboard seats are heated in this GT, which is a great addition. As for cargo space, not bad at 24.4 cubic feet behind the second row. The Ioniq 5 is more space efficient on this front because of the more upright hatch, and that one has 27.2 cubic feet of space. Now when you fold down the second row, the space grows to 50.2 cubic feet, again just right behind the Ioniq 5's 59.3 cubic feet. So from an interior perspective, I'm going to give this a rating of 7 out of 10 because I think this has good design that takes a bit of getting used to. Like, these controls are pretty strange. And there's also some manual operation on the front seat, which sort of cheapens the car. But in general, there's a good amount of space and some nice materials in this car. Now lastly, let's talk about the tech in this Kia EV6 GT. Just like other vehicles in this platform, it's going to have the dual 12.3-inch screens. The infotainment system is pretty responsive, and there's lots of features, lots of customization from the sound, the ambient lighting, how the menus work, and what this favorites button will do. Now for the digital instrument cluster, this has another crisp display. I love how these Hyundai and Kia cars can display the camera views on the digital cluster itself. So for example, if I turn on the left blinker, you could see the feed on the left gauge. And if I turn on the right blinker, you could see the feed on the right-hand gauge. And if I hit the hazard symbol, no, you won't see the feeds on the cluster. And then further up, there is a heads-up display that has an augmented reality feature, and that will highlight the cars that's ahead and also show arrows if you've got the GPS turned on for directions. As for the safety features, there's a lot to list in here. There's forward collision avoidance, blind spot collision avoidance, rear cross traffic alert, lane keeping and lane following assist, parking distance warning, and a bunch more. The driving assistance features are pretty top-notch in this car. I've taken this on some road trips, and the system follows the lanes very smoothly and naturally. You can also change lanes on its own. Just do a soft click on the blinker, and when the conditions are right, this will change lanes on its own. So from a tech perspective, I'll give this a rating of 8 out of 10. These e-gmp cars are very well equipped tech-wise. It's unfortunate that they don't have wireless Apple CarPlay, but in general, I think you'll be really impressed with the quality of life here from a technology perspective. So wrapping all of this up, I think the Kia EV6 GT is a really great EV. The real star here is the bigger set of motors pumping out a total of 576 horsepower, and EVs are known to be able to generate ridiculous amounts of power with not a lot of complex hardware, just bigger motors. The challenge here is, of course, energy storage. They're still expensive to build, and it's still tough to package. This one still uses the same 77.4 kilowatt hour battery size as found in the cheaper models, and as a result, the overall range decreases. This just emphasizes the need for you to look at your use case for these EVs, as they're not for everyone just yet. If you have a reliable form of charging, like if you have a level 2 charger at home or at work, and you live close to work, the limited 206-mile range won't be an issue for you. It's only on those situations where you really have to take this on a longer road trip. And what this still has going for it is the awesome 800-volt charging architecture, so you could still take advantage of the fastest chargers out there. And then the rest of the car is also pretty good. Great exterior design, nice and futuristic interior with a decent amount of tech. So if you're in the market for an EV, you should absolutely put this on your list. So I want to hear your thoughts on this Kia EV6 GT. If you've learned something from this video, please consider hitting that like, subscribe, and that notification bell so that you can be notified the next time I make a new video. Let's wrap it up right there. My name is Hanson, and this has been the 2023 Kia EV6 GT, and I'll see you in the next one.